Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, this is going to be a fun episode. I'm so looking forward to talking to this gentleman. We've been friends for years. This is the second time he's been on the show, and we're talking about his brand new book. But he's an author, coach, speaker. His book, I couldn't put it down. I got yelled at by my wife, but I had to finish it. So his book is truly amazing. And he also spent over 27 years in the SEAL teams, talking leadership, talking about pressure, helping veterans with pressure. So, Stephen, brother, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Richard. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate being back.
Oh, I love it. And like I said, your book, I actually had to finish it. I got so intoxicated in it, I had to finish it in one sitting. So I actually love the new book, and we're going to talk about that. But before I forget, because I got a TBI, if I don't say it, I'm going to forget. What is your definition of resiliency?
Yeah, so I think if you look up the classic definition, obviously this can be, a squishy topic in terms of people think it means or say it means different things. But I always think of it as, you experience, extreme, you just think in the sense of trauma, right? We have a lot of veterans listening to the show. So think about experiencing a traumatic event. Your resiliency is your ability to elastically come back to where you were before that traumatic event. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I would also encourage people to think about that, but also in concert with thinking about your next event, right? Your next traumatic event or simply your next trigger. And think about how to prepare on the front end, as we say in the military, to the left of that bang. But yeah, resilience, being able to come back the same, if not stronger, after a significant event like that.
All right, so before we get onto everything else, something you just said just really hit me. I just interviewed a gentleman. He was an Air Force pilot, and he talks about now before every mission in Afghanistan, they did something called chair flying, to where they actually talked about, the mission, what's going to happen and how they're going to deal with it. And I think a lot of us, if we figured out, well, we know we're going to be going into this trauma, and we start dealing with it before it even happens, I think we have a better chance of having post-traumatic growth instead of post-traumatic stress, correct?
No, and that's right. And I like that. I like that metaphor of chair flying because, in the SEAL teams, we have a similar thing before we go out on a dive. And this is all, it's what you can do is in terms of a mental skill. We call it mental rehearsal or visualization, but this is actual rehearsal, which is we do a dirt dive. So people are not familiar with, and I would argue probably one of, if not the most difficult skill sets military special operations is combat diving. And we're on rebreathers in about 12, 15 feet of water. And we are navigating through pitch black conditions, can barely see right in front of you with nothing but a compass, a depth gauge, and a stopwatch, you and your buddy. And before you do that, you have to memorize not only the compass bearings, but how long each leg takes, because everything's based on how far it takes you to swim underwater for 100 yards. And so you literally will go into a parking lot or wherever, and you will have the compass in your hand, and you will literally walk through that. Now, if we apply that to, say, an assault direct action on land, a direct action mission on land, we're going to do something very similar, and this is going to be primarily focused on big moving pieces and also what we call rock drills, rehearsal of contingencies. And I would say it's the same thing, whether we're talking about maybe a business setting, especially, a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience, from what I understand, if you're getting ready to do something, maybe it's a pitch to an investor or it's an important engagement with a client, with a customer, you want to walk through the same way you would dirt dive, chair fly, that thing. But you could also apply that to maybe something that could be a triggering event. Maybe it's a stressful day or stressful week. You're getting ready to walk through the front door of your house. On the other side of that door is maybe a stressed out spouse, maybe a couple of screaming kids. It's being able to kind of chair fly that scenario as well to make sure, hey, this is what I need to gear myself to. This is what are likely the triggers I'm going to face, but here's what I'm going to stay focused on to make sure that I'm present, engaged, and able to lead effectively in my own home.
I love that. All right, so now let's hop back a little bit into the Wayback Machine. did you always want to be a Navy SEAL? Was that something? How did that come about?
Yeah, believe it or not, I was on a podcast yesterday where I was joking with a former Special Forces guy. We're going back and forth, but and I said initially, like everybody else, he was joking me because I said that when I was a kid, I played Army, right? Army in the woods. And as a kid, I thought I wanted to join the Army, be a Ranger or Army Special Forces, a Green Beret. And as I started learning more about the Navy, I realized, hey, the Navy has special operations forces too. They're called SEALs. And the nice thing about back then is you could go right through boot camp and then go immediately to SEAL training. And if you made it through training, you could go right onto a SEAL team. Whereas in the Special Forces pipeline, at the time, it changed over the years. At the time, you had to actually serve in the Army for several years, which, again, the grand scheme of things, no big deal. But yeah, I was like impatient and wanted to get right. So that was one of the driving factors, that, and I really thought it was, in my opinion, like the toughest selection process. So if I could make it through that, I could really prove a lot to myself. And so by the time I was in high school, I think maybe I was a sophomore in high school, and I was like, yeah, I want to be a SEAL, and I'm going to start, focusing on training for that.
All right, so now I have a question to ask because I've interviewed and talked to many of your brethren. I've had Mr. McCaskill on the show.
Yeah, John's a friend. John's a good friend.
Great person. Rich DeVinny, I've had him on. O'Neill. So what? And I asked them the same question I'm going to ask you. I asked them why they made it through selection process, and a lot of other people did, because it was either they were going to do one more push up or one more rep, or they were going to die. There was no quit. Because I said to John, John, I always had a thought of, because I seen the movie Navy SEAL, and I thought every Navy SEAL was like 6'5", jacked and blonde hair, blue eyes. And I said, John, you look like my accountant, So I said, so my theory of what a Navy SEAL was totally off. So, talk to us about what it takes to make it through selection process.
Well, let's be clear. You have to be supremely fit, and you have to be capable and comfortable in the water. Those things are all true, right? You have to be a strong runner. You have to be, good at calisthenics, and there has to be that level of physical toughness. But everybody arrives, relatively on that level playing field. Now you have former college athletes that can perform at a super high level, swimmers, water polo players. They're obviously going to have a much, easier time with the water evolutions or tests. But really, fundamentally, at the end of the day, when you take outliers aside and things like injuries and I would say even to a greater degree, performance failures or not meeting the standards, which, you would try, a fair amount of people for that, really ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to your level of commitment. What are you willing to do? How much are you willing to invest in terms of pain and sacrifice to make it through to a community that lets you do the things that you want to do? And that's, ultimately, if there's one thing, that's what it comes down to.
So, because I'm sure you when you were going through, you've seen many a men ring that bell. And what was your thought process watching them ring the bell and you're saying, well, that's not going to be me?
Yeah, and I'm very forthright about this. Like, I really went into buds reading the books, and to me, I had confidence issues, right? And that was the biggest thing I probably had going against me is I looked at SEAL training as this mythical beast, right? This dragon. And I'm like, can I really even do this? Right. And but what I found though, each thing, no matter how hard it was, and it was really hard, it was never quite as hard as I had built it up to be in my mind. And so when I went through SEAL training, really, it was the totality of the thing, in my opinion, is the biggest challenge. I never actually felt like I was going to quit, but I had doubts. But, when I would see other guys quit, I hate to say it, right? It's when I would, especially like during Hell Week, and you do what's called surf torture, which is where you basically go, you lock arms with your teammates to the left and right of you, and you walk on line into the water and you sit down in the surf zone. And that cold water splashes over you. It gets up your nose, down your throat. And, it's that combined with the cold, and it's just a breaking point for a lot of people. And you're sitting there you're still lined up on the beach, and the instructor staff is coming. They're checking for hypothermia, right, to make sure that everybody's cold but safe. And you would see guys just would break away, and the class would kind of be like, no, don't quit, because that's what we thought we were supposed to do. But each time somebody quit, I kind of was like, it made me feel a little stronger, because I'm like, I'm still here. They can't take it. I can still take it.
All right. So let me ask you a question, because, Goggins even talked about how he had to go through a couple times from injuries and stuff like that. But he said, that he struggled with the whole team concept. And that's why, he got out, a lot earlier than he should have. And I believe that, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And I love that about you Navy guy, you special ops guys, because you guys are a family. You guys are any special ops, you guys are always family. You're always talking about teamwork. So, talk about the whole, the team concept, because you guys take it to the nth level with the whole team, guys. Because sometimes from what I know, obviously I never went through, but you guys know what each other's thinking, because you guys went through so much. So please talk about that.
I would say that differentiates us maybe a little bit. And again, to be clear, I never went through Army SF, selection, SFA, I think it's called. Maybe not. I'm drawing a blank on what the Special Forces selection process is, or RASP for the Rangers, and then Ranger School. I don't want to speak to that because I have never been through it, but from what I understand, it's a lot more of the individual piece, where at SEAL training at Buds, it's very much an individual effort, and you're tested performance-wise on all your skills. But the emphasis from day one is team. And so you literally, how they reinforce this is you get pounded into your head. You will never go anywhere alone. You want to go over to the bathroom? You're bringing a swim buddy. You need to go over here and you're in trouble. The swim buddy escorts you over. You don't go anywhere without a swim buddy. And it reinforces the fact that you need to be an effective part of the team, because that's one of the things they assess for. It's great if you're, a super high performer, but can I trust you to put the needs of the mission and of your teammates above your own? Because if not, you're not going to make it through. In fact, one of the first things I learned at Buds is one of the instructors, we were getting our gear, freshly shaved heads, and getting our canteens and our swim bins, whatever that was. And we're all kind of sitting there waiting. And one of the instructors, just this big guy, is walking by, and he stops and he comes over and he says, Hey, gents, I don't know if anybody's told you all this, but ain't none of you going to make it through this training on your own. He's like, that's not the type of people that we're looking for here. Those few of you that graduate and make it to the SEAL teams, none of you are going to do great things by yourselves. It's only going to be by, with, and through the people to the left and right of you. And so, everything we do, and in Hell Week and up in first phase, it's everything happens in boat crews. That's why you carry logs. That's why you carry these boats around. So that's a long-winded way of reinforcing, your point that you were making.
All right. So then let me ask you a question, because you could have just, maybe did your 6-8 years, got your trident, retire as a Navy SEAL, go on all speaking tours, book tours, and all that stuff. But what made you, once you get to that 10-year mark, you're either in for 6 or you're in for a dozen. So what made you want to stay? And what was the difference in your mindset making it a career instead of just making it a stop?
There's the overarching theme is kind of like you suggested, was the brotherhood. When I was going through SEAL training, and I quickly realized the caliber of people that I would be working with, I was like, hey, if I could be a part of this club, I have really found a family here. And that's really what sustained me. That, and I said, hey, I'm going to keep doing this job as long as it's still fun. And when it's not, I'm going to exit. And so I was having a lot of fun throughout the careers, and, ups and downs. Not everything is fun. Not every tour, not every position is enjoyable. But for the most part, it was. Now, to be fair, I did come close to getting out at the 10-year mark, but I had some good mentors. They were kind of like, hey, a couple of times, it was like 20-year mark. I'm like, yeah, well, I've done 20 years. Why don't I, or up at the 19-year mark? I'm like, I'm closing on a career. One of my guys that I really respected was like, come on, dude, what the hell else are you actually going to do? And I'm like, all right, I'll stay, I'll stay in some more. And even to the very last year, I was supposed to get out at 26 years, but I was a part of creating this program for the Navy called Warrior Toughness. And the admiral running the program actually brought me into his office and asked me if I would consider staying one extra year to help kind of further develop and grow the program. And I'm like, all right, I'm an easy sale. People can talk me into things easily, I guess. But yeah, there was exit points, opportunities to leave, but I always ended up just wanted to keep going.
So then, what was, because obviously you have to have a different mindset when you go from being on all the missions to now you're starting to plan the mission. And, now one day, you're one of the guys, and the next day you're making sure that those guys get home safe and to their families. So what was that switch in mindset from just being one of the guys to being the leader of the guys?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I didn't really have that difficult, of a transition from that piece. I think it's kind of like I did, my time as like an E6 and below, a petty officer, right, going through. And then, I went over to training command for several years and then came back as a platoon chief, right, the E7, senior enlisted leader for, an 18-man SEAL platoon. And you kind of always know, you're like, hey, you're going to do this, you're going to go away, you're going to come back and you're going to do your milestone. And I think it's, by the time I got to do my troop chief, it's, that's where you're the senior enlisted leader for 2 SEAL platoons. And then you really kind of push your back and you're like, hey, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do all these runs. And then, sometimes the guys are like, all right, can you not talk as much? We're trying to be leaders here. And I'm like, all right, I'm sorry. And then I'd have to kind of push my way out a little bit. And then when we went over that was my last operational leadership position, was a troop chief. And when we deployed overseas, that whole troop, we're talking about, about 45, 50 people. Now we're getting spread all over the place. And so really there's no, I could go out and do a few things here and there, but for the most part, that time had passed me by and the guys are going out in smaller units doing things. And that would be like back in 2011. So yeah. So I don't know. I mean, you miss it, but then you're like, you kind of accept it because that's always the way it's going to be. Eventually you have a limited lifespan in terms of your operation time. You're as a SEAL operator.
All right. So I want to take a deep dive into your transitioning, because I know a lot of veterans, no matter what branch, how many years they put in, a lot of us lose ourselves because now we're starting all over again with our transition. But first, I want to thank our sponsors. As you guys know, I was in the military for 23 years, with GNC for over 30. I loved energy drinks, but I always hated the taste of them because they tasted like ass. So I came out with my own called Vertical Momentum Coffee. Twice the energy, twice the caffeine. Amazing taste, no crash. And the best part is it's all made hand roasted by veteran hands. And 100% of the proceeds go to help veterans struggling with PTSD and homelessness. So if you love coffee with a mission, definitely write coffee down below and I'll get that information to you. Also, since I started drinking my own coffee, yes, I get high on my own supply. I stopped using sugar because my friend Sam, he's a beehive keeper. He actually sent me honey to try out, and I've been using just honey, and my blood sugar has dropped over 200 points just by using pure honey instead of using sugar. And also, he also makes honey lollipops. So if you guys love honey, if you want some good lollipops for your kids, write honey down below and I'll get that information to you. So Steve, let me ask you, because like every soldier, airman, SEAL, we all have a shelf life. And like you were talking about earlier, and you knew you were going to get out at some time. How far ahead did you start planning for your transitioning, and what steps did you start taking before you got out?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I wasn't super forward thinking, as much as I should have been. And I think I was coming towards the twilight of my career and I was really thinking, I'm like, what do I want to do? I was like, I don't know. I looked at different things. I worked before I left Virginia Beach in 2015 to go up to the Navy boot camp for my final tour up there. And while my last job in Virginia Beach was to work at the headquarters command, where I was what you call requirements combat development, and basically being kind of the liaison, the go-between between the end user, the operator, and industry or programming. Basically, and my area was weapons and VAS, so weapons, explosives, and visual augmentation systems. And I was like, hey, I'll do that. I like gear. I like cold weather clothing. I like guns and gear. I'll do something in that space. And then I realized it's like at the end of the day, by the time you do a job like that, you're not even going to be the hands-on gear. You're just going to be running programmatics. And so I'm like, But anyway, that's long story short. As I was coming towards the end of my career, I really had to reflect and say, what is it that was my greatest contribution to the military, in terms of service? And how can I take that, align it with my passion, and actually try to monetize that in some way? Because I was not going to, I didn't want to go work in a cubicle in an office building somewhere, ride a train into the city. I just didn't want to do that. And I'm like, I want to connect with people. I was an instructor in the military. I think I was really good at training people. I learned a lot on how to do that, training, developing, leading people. So how can I do that? So I decided, I want to be a professional speaker. Because when I go out there on stage, it's almost like fast roping out of a helo onto the target, right? You feel that kind of excitement, enthusiasm. Yeah. So let me keep doing that. And again, I just enjoy meeting new people and connecting with people. So that's kind of what led to that.
So, when you got out, did the whole world open up to you just because you're a Navy SEAL?
No, definitely not. In fact, like I said, I was supposed to get out in 2018. And I stayed on an extra year. And one of the conditions that I said was, hey, when if I'm going to stay another year, I want to get no cost orders, meaning like I don't have to use leave to go do professional speaker training. And I did that in this phenomenal place called Heroic Public Speaking in New Jersey. And so I did that, and I'm thinking, hey, all I need, and I was so darn naive. And the point here for other people considering being an entrepreneur is the thing that you love doing, whatever it is, whether you're developing a widget, you're developing a product, or you're like me and you're offering a service, the thing that you like doing, you have to consider that's a very small part of what the overall business is, right? The overall investment of your time. And so for me, I realized just how naive and ignorant I was about not only just the speaking industry, but what it takes to run a business. And I was really not prepared. And so I invested so much about being good on stage. I ended my career. I was hitting the ground running. I had some success. And then COVID hit literally 2 months after I retired. And I was not prepared to pivot into the virtual space. So I struggled for a little bit. And, slowly but surely, I've been able to kind of develop some more momentum and get more and more speaking gigs, more and more, customers. And so, but it hasn't been easy. And it's not like my phone rings off the hook just because I'm a former Navy SEAL. I got to put the work in just like everybody else, right? I mean, if you shot, the number one terrorist in the face, I guess, maybe that gives you an edge. But for me, just running the mill SEAL operator, leader, master chief, I've had to really work at it.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that one. So, but anyway, because I hear it all the time because I public speak all the time. I'm on different stages with millionaires, billionaires, so forth. And everybody says, oh, it's easy being a public speaker. Hell no, it's not, because, it takes presence. It takes focus. It takes practice to be a great speaker, to be a great, to be a great orator. So, talk to us about the learning curve of, there's difference between talking to your group of guys and then, but then talking on the stage in front of an audience of all kinds of people. So talk about the learning curve.
No, that's exactly right. Because I spent a lot of time as you say, at the podium in the military, meeting in front as an instructor. You're taught how to teach as an instructor. But what you have to realize when you're in front of an audience, let's say, for example, now I do workshops almost as much as I do keynotes, but your typical keynote, let's say 45 to 50 minutes, you go out there on stage and you're basically unpacking for the audience a big idea or something inspirational, right? And I always try to include takeaway points. Like there's always something that I want to be prescriptive, even from my keynotes. But primarily, you're trying to get them to buy into a big idea that you have. Now, in order for them to do that, you have to take them on a journey, almost like a roller coaster ride with humor, with excitement, you have to captivate the audience, but you also have to tie into the emotions of the audience. And it takes a lot of skill. And you have to do things that don't detract from that. So it means you have to be very intentional. And I look at it just like the combat operation, where we train, and we practice, we rehearse. We know exactly what happens. We go down the hallway, open door left, closed door right. We know exactly what we're going to do. It's the same thing when you're doing this on stage. Every time you move, it's intentional. I don't wander, and that everything that I do and most of what I say is exactly how I want to deliver it. Now, I don't memorize my speech 100%, but there's a lot of it that is memorized, and there's a lot of it that is, I know the content so well that I don't have to memorize it. But that's the thing. It's very tight. I rehearse the hell out of it every time I get on stage.
And something that I do, that one of my mentors, his name is Sean Douglas. He's a three-time TEDx speaker. And he taught me, get to wherever you're speaking an hour and a half early, walk around, talk to the audience, talk to the people in the audience, get to know them. Hi, how are you? And talk to them a little bit. So when you go up there, you're not cold, and you can look at that person and be like, I always, if I talk to somebody, I'll even mention them during the speech. But, I was talking to John, an amazing individual. So it kind of warms up the audience, but it's nice to be able to actually talk to people and get their perspective on, building relationships is something I would say. So talk to us a little bit about that and building a relationship with your audience.
Yes, no, you hit on a great point. And however possible, I try to do that. And sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes, depending on the industry or organization you're working with, they don't really want you behind closed doors until it's your turn. Yeah. But I always offer, like whenever I go to an event, when I fly to an event, I always insist, unless there's some compelling reason, I always insist on flying in the night before. And so I always offer up, are you going to have a cocktail mixer? You're going to have something like that, because I'd love to be able to just kind of, with everybody's hair down, you just go in there and have a conversation and really kind of learn things. But what else I'll do is I also will sometimes I'll ask the people, whoever are bringing me in, depending on whether it's a meeting planner or whether it's kind of somebody at a specific organization that is bringing me in. I always say, hey, are there some people, maybe that 2-3 people that would be maybe eager to have a 5-minute conversation with me over the phone to really understand kind of, hey, this is what life looks like to them. Here's what specific challenges they may have. And here's how I can kind of connect that and roll that into kind of my presentation. So to your point, anytime that I can engage, anytime that I can sit through prior sessions, 100% I want to do that.
All right. So now you get out and you decided to become a public speaker. And, like Mike Tyson said, everybody got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Now COVID hits. So now you have to pivot and adjust. I think pivot was the word for like 2 years. I got played out a lot. Yeah. So talk to us about how you had to pivot to the online world instead of the face-to-face world.
Yeah. So it was not an easy journey for me. I am not a big tech guy, and I have to be, when you're doing stuff like that, or, even today, I still do virtual events, and you got to be your own AV crew, which it was a steep learning curve. I spent so much money trying things that I ended up not working for me. And I think initially, as I'm trying to figure it out, it's like everybody's on Zoom calls. Okay, well, now everybody's on so many Zoom calls. You can't show up and just be another speaker on a Zoom call. You've got to do things. You've got to really you got to raise the quality of the presentation, right? You got to raise production value. And so right after COVID, here I am, I'm in my, feeling sorry for myself, tearing up advanced checks to gigs that were now going to be canceled. And I had nothing. Like, I literally, thank God for my retirement, I had no gigs on the horizon at that point. Nobody did, really. No live gigs, at least. A lot of people immediately, they transitioned into the virtual space. I wasn't prepared. I was back on my heels. But then I really started thinking about it. I'm like, all right, at the end of the day, why do I do this? I love speaking, but what I really want to do is offer a message to the world that I think is beneficial to other people. So let's put aside the money. Let's put aside the medium of how I deliver that. And let's just stick with providing value to people that could use it. Because right now there's a lot of things. One thing military families know is turmoil. They know turmoil, upheaval, gone, spouse in and out. They have to deal with a lot of that stuff. And so I think I have value that I can add there. And so I started just reaching out to former clients. And I said, hey, I'm not looking even to get paid, but if I can be of any kind of utility, if I can hop on any of your calls, let me have a shot. And so a lot of people took me up on that. Of course, people ended up paying me for it. And I really started to figure it out. And now it took me a lot longer than it should have to get the virtual stuff down. But, I eventually I figured it out. And by the time I really got it dialed in, then the actual live stuff started coming back. So.
All right. So now I loved your book. You sent it to me. And like I said, I really love it. And I've learned a lot so much from it. And I went back and I listened to our first interview just so I can kind of get my bearings again. But, a lot of people had to pivot, like we said. And for me, I had to pivot from speaking on stages to putting out digital products, putting it out evergreen products. And, a lot of people, like I was with GNC for 30 years, but after COVID, a lot of companies went out of business. And I had to realize that, okay, if I was selling products at a store, I'm open from 9 in the morning to 9 at night. But if I put a product out into the ether, I can make money 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So talk to us about writing your book and also not only having a physical copies, but also having an evergreen product also.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting take. And so I think initially, I'm candid with this. I have no problem saying this. Towards the end, and the concept of writing a book, I'm like, I'm not writing a book, because I would always kind of, the Army guys especially, like, oh, look, another Navy SEAL writing a book. And so I was like, yeah, I didn't want to be that guy. And so I really didn't want to write it. And then I realized, hey, at the end of the day, if I want to really get my message out, if I want to be a more successful speaker, then I really felt like I needed to write a book. And so I decided that I was going to do it. And again, to be forthright, I was using it as a way to build my speaking business. No other thing. But as you actually started writing it, then you kind of become more emotionally attached. And then you realize you're like, yes, I believe in these concepts. I think they will help people. So it's got to be more about that. So at the end of the day, I don't know how many books I'm going to ever end up selling, but it's out there. It's something that I can be proud of. I wrote it myself, and maybe it looks like it to some people, but I wrote it myself, and it's out there, and it's something that I'm proud of. Is it the greatest book out there? Maybe not. But again, it was a great milestone for me. And so, yeah, I mean, it's good to have that. Again, it hopefully helps me with my speaking business, but it's something that will always be out there. And so you're right about that.
Well, like my friend Gary Vaynerchuk said to me, he said, the word author is short for the word authority. He said, so when you put a book out, like my book hit #1 twice on Amazon for addiction and recovery. So when somebody asked me, well, what makes you, capable of talking or speaking about this? Well, I literally wrote the book on addiction and recovery. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times, once people say, well, he wrote a book, and it makes you become more of an authority in what you're doing. So for me, I'm a low tech redneck. Everybody knows it. So I actually wrote my whole book on a yellow pad and then put it into computer. But for me, when I wrote my book, it was very cathartic. A lot of healing happened. So talk to us about the process of writing a book, and what was that like?
Yeah. So I'll just walk you through the steps. Hopefully I'm not making people's eyes glaze over, but I essentially was like, all right, I got to do this. Initially, before COVID hit, I was like, I'm going to be a successful speaker. I'm just going to hire a ghostwriter then I realized, you know, what I learned about the whole ghostwriter thing is it really is not going to save me a whole lot of work, because as I went through the editing process, I realized that nobody's going to write it how I want it. So paying somebody $1, $1.25 a word, not only is it exorbitantly expensive, but I don't think it's going to save me that much work. And so the first gal that I hooked up with, she basically was a writing strategy coach. So she basically said, and she was enormously useful. She didn't tell me how to write or any of this. She basically said, here's how to structure, basically create a battle rhythm on how you're going to write the book. Find out when you're going to write it, how much every day you're going to write it, create a framework for how you're going to get this stuff done. And that was really a great way to just get the wheels on the train moving. And so I did that. And then took me way too long to finally find somebody that I was going to, partner with, a hybrid publisher. And so I found the hybrid publisher, and then we started creating. I just started writing, and I'll be honest, and I don't hide this, I did not enjoy writing the book. But what I really did enjoy were all the people that I got to interview. And so, as you know from reading the book, there's some of my stories in there, but it's not a book about me. I want it to be prescriptive in nature. So there's a lot of other stories in the book: professional athletes, Olympians, business leaders, other veterans. And I want to make that red thread about what it takes to be your best self on your hardest day. And so that's the red thread that goes through it. And so I got a lot of enjoyment out of that. And that was really the favorite part. But going through, editing, re-editing, really trying to, untangle a lot of the, the big ball of Christmas lights. And finally it was the audio book. And I did the audio book, didn't love that, did it, but knocked that out in about 2 days, and then went back for another solid day to do the pickups, the edits. But yeah, it's good to have it done, but it's kind of anticlimactic. People are like, are you so excited you got the book done? I'm like, it's just kind of like, I don't know. I wasn't super excited the book was done. I'm glad and satisfied, and I am proud of the work. But yeah, there wasn't like some big, I don't know. But that's just me.
Now, everybody that you've had in the book, and you guys, when you pick up the book, you're going to see a lot of names that you recognize. Every one of them had to go through pressure. Every one of them had to go through problems. If it's not trauma, if it's, pressure in business, pressure on the field. So how do we, because I find, even my sister said it, we were going through some emotional times with the family. And for me, when all the shit started hitting the fan, I kind of just got focused and I got quiet. And she's like, well, how do you deal with those? Like, because the military, we're taught to thrive in chaos. So talk to us about learning how to thrive under pressure.
Yeah, I always say this. Part of the drive behind the book are the things I learned about my own shortcomings, the things that I didn't get right, whether that's as a military leader or whether that's, more painfully as a spouse, as a husband. And so my view might be a little different. And one of the things that was like really key when I was one of the architects for that Warrior Toughness program, I was partnered up with a psychologist and a chaplain, and we built this program. And what was vitally important, I think, to all of us, to all three of us, but especially to me, was everything that we teach a young sailor or officer, every skill that we give them to perform when missiles are hitting the ships or bullets are flying. I want them to be able to consistently transition that skill set into their personal lives, because that was a huge gap in my life. I could deal with the stress in a military context, or even like, something big happened, the house flooded or a car accident. I could deal with that. But it was the little things that would set me off, the stupid inconsequential things that would cause my temper to spike and just, show up poorly as a poor leader in my home. And that would start to also spill over professionally as I would lose my temper, erratically sometimes with the people that I was leading, and negatively impacted my ability to lead. And so the things that I learned, in retrospect, and sadly, in some cases, I learned it a little too late, Those were kind of the driving factors. And so the military teaches you, I think the biggest thing the military taught me, or maybe I just picked this up myself, is that AAR process, is being able to be reflective in your experience and your thinking. And for me, it's being able to know hey, candidly, I did not get that right. And you know what? I probably will maybe make that mistake again. Although as hard as I try not to repeat that specific, mistake, I will probably fall short again. But I can't let that throw me off the track of trying to be better and trying to grow personally. So,
and for me, like whatever's going on business wise, relationship wise, I always ask, what's the worst case scenario? And then I'll worry. I'm not going to worry really about the best case scenario. I'm going to worry about the worst case, because if the worst case doesn't happen, it's in between, then we're still doing good. But I think so many people get wrapped around the axle, and they don't think about perspective. And I think that's something I'm really starting to hammer down on in life, is the perspective. Like you said, even like Gary says in his brand new book, 12 and a half, that if my family's healthy, my kids are healthy, everything else is good. I could deal with everything else. But I think sometimes we get so wrapped around the axle with the little stuff that we don't realize the big stuff that's really important, like our wives, our kids, our families. I think a lot of times that's more important than our businesses, right?
No, that's exactly right. In fact, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things I didn't mention one of the things that I really had to connect to, as I was extremely frustrated with the fact that I could not get paid to speak during COVID, I realized, okay, what opportunity. And I always try to push this concept, because what opportunity. And this is where I kind of bring in a little of the stoic, capital S, stoicism from our the Greeks and the Romans, is that every situation affords you an opportunity. It may not be an opportunity that you want. It may be painful, but it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to demonstrate grace, forgiveness, resilience, that performance under pressure. And so I realized the opportunity is for me to better connect during COVID with my family. Is to me to demonstrate that I can, help navigate that family through challenging circumstances. And so that was the big thing for me. So it's, really important to kind of have that perspective.
Now, like I said, you talk a lot about a lot of great people in that book. If you would say there's one trait that they all possess that the average person doesn't possess or needs to possess, what would that one trait be?
Being deliberate and being intentional. That's one of the most important things, is look ahead and that's the concept of the X. The X is that most difficult, that most dangerous, that most high pressure situation that you're going to walk into. It also can be the situations that yield your biggest opportunities. So you better be deliberate and intentional with recognize those on the outset, looking ahead over the horizon and saying, when is that X going to occur to me? And how do I create the architecture for my success? And when it happens, more than likely, there's going to be some lessons. I'm going to be able to draw from that experience. And I'm only going to be able to grow and further develop and come back even better if I have the ability to draw the right conclusions from that experience, but put it deliberately into steps. And so sometimes we need to detach from a situation, detach from the emotions of a situation, look at things objectively, and be able to tweak and adjust the plan either on the fly or next time. And the people that I interviewed really had the ability to do those couple of things.
Now
you asked me for one, but I gave you a couple. So it's like Lay's. You can't just have one.
I love it. For me, I always hear people years ago, I always see people saying, well, this is my word for the year. And I thought it was stupid, but this year I chose two words for me. And one was attention. And number two was intention. Because I think that, if everything you do is intentional, then you're going to get where you go a lot quicker, because you're not wasting time. You're not wasting finances. You're on that one goal because you're doing everything intentional. So now talk to us about what you're doing now. And if you had, because now you've been in business 5 years, 2018 to 23, what would be the top 3 business lessons you've learned that you can teach a brand new veteran getting out of the military today? What lessons could you teach them? Your top 3.
I think primarily it's about building a team, if building a strong team. And that doesn't necessarily mean a 1099 employee or whatever, but that's the people you surround yourself with. And I kind of refer to this as a board of advisors. And these are the people that serve different functions. You have a person on that board. And again, it's not an official board. It's just a term. Is you select the right people to engage with, to seek counsel with, to be a sounding board, to give you both overall advice and maybe some tactical advice on the specific things, the technical advice that you need. And so you have people that are going to be that boot in the ass. That are going to tell you the truth even when it hurts. You're going to have people that are going to pick you up. They're going to pick you up and make you feel better when you're kind of struggling. You're going to have people that are going to hold you accountable to who you say you are, who you want to be. And then you're going to have the people that you can always reach out to that can give you subject matter expertise to help you. I think that's one of the first things. And then to really do your homework. Understand what all of the facets, if you want to be a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, really understand before you jump in with both feet, really understand what you're taking on. Talk to people, not just the people that were successful, the people that everything of different people, and find out what their struggles were. Find out how they overcame certain challenges. And I think those are probably, maybe 2 things that I would start with right there.
And that's something that I love that you talk
about what you're getting into.
I love that you talk about building a team because, I took a deep dive into successful people and everybody talked about Napoleon Hill, but I wanted to find out who he learned from. And that went back to Andrew Carnegie back in the 1908. Yep. And even then they were talking about masterminds, that if you're going to be successful, you need to be in a mastermind or have a group of, because even Mr. Carnegie, back then he had their 3 or 4 people and they would knock around ideas, knock around thoughts. So even back in the 1900s, we talk about, they talked about masterminds. But if you talk to somebody in 2023 about paying to join a mastermind, they look at you like you're crazy. But even like John Lee Doom was my mentor, said his first mentor, he had to pay $5,000 to be a mentor, to get mentored in a mastermind. He said that was the best $5,000 he ever spent, because the next year he got paid $25,000 to speak at that mastermind event. So talk about a little bit about that masterminds in 2023.
Yeah, I've been part of mastermind groups and they've definitely helped me. I was part of a mastermind group that it definitely helped me out during COVID. The group kind of just dissolved. It wasn't a paid thing. It was just a bunch of like-minded people. And I think there's several communities. I have a speaking community that I'm part of, Heroic Public Speaking, that has a bunch of people that I can always consult with. And I also have another group. I did some training with a great guy, great professional speaker called Anthony Trucks. And I don't know if you've heard of him. So I was a part of his group and just got a lot of great wisdom from the people in that group. And so, again, we don't need to, nor can we, do this all on our own. So, yeah.
All right. So now last question is, how do we find you? How do we support your mission? Where do we pick up your amazing book?
So right now, if I look at it's April 5th. And the book itself, ebook and paperback, is available anywhere online books are sold. And then April 18th, the audiobook will launch. And so, again, get Audible or anywhere you get audiobooks.
And what is the name of your book?
What's that?
What is the name of your book?
Life on the X. That's a good question. Life on the X, a Navy SEAL's Guide to Meeting Any Challenge with Courage, Confidence, and Readiness. And so feel free to go ahead and connect with me on my website, stephendrum.com, STEPHEN. stephen.grum.com, or find me on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Stephen, brother, I just want to say thank you you're one of the only 2-time guests I've ever had on the show.
I'm honored.
I just wanted to say thank you. And
Thank
you for the book. It's actually made me think about a lot of different things in my business and up-leveling my business as we speak. So I just want to say thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
So guys, make sure you reach out to him. You can get in touch with him. He's a very friendly person. He's got a great LinkedIn account. He's great on Facebook. So just reach out, tell him you said hey, and pick up his book. It's a game changer if you are a business owner or if you just want to up level in life and business. It's where you can do a little bit of both. So Stephen, brother, thank you so much.
All right, take care, man. Thanks for having me on again.
All right, guys, I love you. Guys, remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. If you found value in this, please leave a comment below. So if you have any questions for Stephen, I'm sure I can get those to him so he can answer your questions. All right, guys, I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Stephen, have an amazing week, brother.
You too, brother.